Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our series. Today, I want to make it that we can control the various units on our screen. So, if we build and run our project so far, notice that we only control this single knight. So, for instance, if I want to control the rogue, I can't click or select. I just keep moving the same knight. So let's make this behavior a bit more dynamic, that we can choose who we're going to move. So let's stop a project. And this is, I think, a good time to introduce a view model. A view model is something that sort of glues our visual logic, that's for instance in this game scene, but also our UI that we have in this SwiftUI view, to somehow uh, uh, glue that to our model data, that is our entities, our maps, our actions, and so forth. So let's start by creating a view model, and to do so, I'm going to create a new Swift file called a view model, and this will house a struct called, this will house a class, and it can be final because we don't want to inherit from this one. This will have a class, and we will have some tests for the view model as well. So I'll call this one, create a new file called ViewModel tests, import XE test, and again, testable import our project, create a final class ViewModel tests that inherit from XET. And test case, yeah, that's how you write it. And let's start by creating our first test. And our first test will be really simple. What I want to do is I want to have a test that if I click a tile, this selects the tile when no tile is selected. So if you don't have a tile selected, then clicking a tile selects the tile. So this requires a view model. And I'm going to check that our view model selected tile property is nil. That property doesn't exist yet, but it will in a minute. And then I want to call a function called clickTile, and we'll pass in a tile that we select. So this will be a vector 3D that takes, for instance, a coordinate 2, 3, and 2 high. And then I want to assert that our view model selected tile, which we need to implement still, is indeed this same coordinate. So let's create some stuff to have this thing actually compile correctly. So let's see. So let's create another editor. Let's put our view model side by side. And let's start implementing. So apparently what I need is a field called a selected tile that is an optional of type vector 3D. This should now limit the warnings, and we need a function called click tile that takes in a coordinate and can be empty for now. Let's call it a tile. Now, let's build a run. And that test fails because selected tile is still nil and not the expected value. So let's start by making sure that this tile indeed then exists. Or indeed is set. So we can say selected tile is equal to tile. Then I want to test what happens if I click a tile and I click outside of our map. So what if I click a tile that doesn't exist? So in that case, I want to deselect. I want to deselect a tile when a tile outside map is clicked. This is sort of a way of resetting a selection. So let's again create a new view model. Let's set the selected tile to a random value correctly. Then we'll say view model, click tile, and we choose a tile that is definitely not on our map. For instance, at -100, 100, and -100. And then we assert that our view model selected tile is nil. So let's run the test. And the test fails because it is still set to this previous value. So what can we do? Well, what we can do is we can, of course, check if map contains tile, set selected tile. This means that we need to have the map in our view model. So let's create a field for that called map. And we now also need an initializer. And we actually only want the map so far, because the other one can be defaulted to a nil. So now we have a map. Now we can say if map.tiles.keys contains our tile xy value, then we set the value. And this still doesn't set it to nil, but if we start by setting selected tile to nil, then we can't build anymore because we need to pass in a map in the other when constructing the view models. So what I'll do is I'll create a fixture of an example map, and I'll use a height map that I can copy from some other place. Let's see, I have a map. I think I have an example map in here somewhere. No, I'll just write it out. So the first row will just be ones. It will be a 5x5 map. Here there will be a couple of twos. And then a couple of ones again. So now we can pass in this map as a property when creating the view models. Let's run the test again. So now the test passes, and we have indeed the map associated with our view model. The next step I want to do is I want to be able to select an entity. So this selects a tile, if a tile is clicked, and a tile may or may not have an entity or a unit on top of it. So let's create a test for that. What if I click a tile, then I select an entity when a tile with an entity is clicked. So we have an entity, and example entity that has a start position somewhere. We have a view model. Let's make sure we have a location on our map. Our example map. Then let's assert that our view model selected entity, that's a field we still have to define, is nil by default. Then we click a tile at the entity dot position, and then we have the selected entity. That is we use the unwrap function from our test library, where we take our view model selected entity. This now means that this becomes a throwing function, and then we can assert that the selected entity is pointing to the entity we created. So this doesn't compile because we're missing a selected entity field. Let's add that one. Build around the test. Okay, and our test now fails because no entity is set to selected entity. So to do that, we also need to keep track of all the entities. So let's create another field in our view model that holds all entities. And we need to pass these ones in. And then we also need to make sure that we pass it in all the view models that we create. So here we need the entity. In this one, entity can just be empty. And now our code again should compile. However, the test will still fail because we're not yet setting the selected entity. So let's take our entity and let's do entities.first, where our position is the same as the tile that is passed in. So we take the first one that matches, and let's see, position equals the tile that was passed in, and if we have one, then we say selected entity equals our entity. Let's run this one, and let's run this test. Okay. Now let's look at the case where we click on a tile that doesn't contain an entity. So click tile, deselect entity when a tile without an entity is clicked. So let's take our entity. Example entity. This one has a position. Let's create our view model using our example map and an array with our entity. Then we set our selected entity to the entity. We do ViewModel dot click a tile at the entity dot position plus, let's say we go right one step, so there's nothing there. Then we should assert that our view model that selected entity is now nil. So let's run this test. And the test fails because we aren't deselecting. So in our view model, the easiest solution is just to also make sure that we, as a start, deselect our entity. Okay. So I want to add one final test to a view model. What happens if you select a tile when you already have a tile selected? When a tile is selected. I think it's almost the same as when no tile is selected. So let's just select a tile to some random value. Then we click a tile and validate that that one is indeed the one that gets selected. This test should immediately pass because we created a very specific condition in the first one in the text. However, the actual implementation doesn't really care about whether a previous tile was selected or not, because it always starts by deselecting. Okay, so we have a first version of our view model. I think we should now use the view model, and we can do that by making sure that we get rid of the example map in the GameScene. So this is our map, and make sure that we bring it to our view model. Where are we going to store our view model? I'm going to store it in our content view. So we have a scene. We should also have a view model that is our view model that has a map based on a height map, and that one we can get from our map. Let's get rid of this one. I'm sorry, that one we can get from our GameScene. So this is the height map we're going to use. Content view, yes. And our entities we also take from our GameScene. We can actually delete them here and add them to the content view. So now we have everything in our view model, and that's associated with the content view. Meaning in our GameScene we can also get rid of the map. Let's see. So we have our content. We'll look into this in a bit. So let's go back to our GameScene. So we got rid of the map and the entities, but what we do need is a view model. So let's create a link to our view model. And because we don't have a constructor for GameScene, we can use will use an implicitly unwrapped optional to store our ViewModel, meaning we can set it from a content view as we create our scene from there. So this exclamation mark means that I sort of guarantee that this is an optional value, but I promise that it won't be nil anytime we're going to use it. And if it does, then our app will crash, which is of course unfortunate, but those things happen. So let's look into our redraw function, and this one now complains that it doesn't know where the map is. No problem. Just create a quick shortcut for a ViewModel.map. And also it might be useful to have our entities here as a shortcut for our ViewModel.entities. My goal now is not to immediately work on selecting and deselecting. What I want to do is I want to make sure that this thing again compiles and runs. So we have these functions to rotate our knight. I actually want to get rid of those. I don't need those anymore. And also the move to random position. I don't want to fix them. I just want to get rid of them. And you also need a map in touches began. No problem. I'll use the same trick here. Create a reference to our map and also take our entities and create a shortcut for that so this code can stay the same. So now this should again run. Oh, of course, we no longer in our content view can do the random and the rotation of the knight, but I wanted to get rid of this stuff anyway. So let's just build and run this. And this doesn't work because our ViewModel doesn't get set anywhere. So I'm sorry. In our content view, we need to make sure that we set the ViewModel for the scene. So after ignore save area, what we can do is we can do an onAppear, and onAppear takes a closure where we say scene.ViewModel equals our own ViewModel. Let's run this one. Okay, so we have, sorry, we again have what we had. So we can still move our knights around, but we can't yet select any of the other units. But at least we have what we already had. So that's nice. So let's take it one step further and actually start using our ViewModel. So back in our GameScene, I want to do things a bit differently. Let's start by where we're creating the move animation. So here we're checking explicitly for the entity 0. I'm going to do it a bit different. I'm going to say if let move animation is create follow path animation for our entity. And this means that for every entity that has a move action associated to it, it can create a move animation, not just for entities 0 anymore. Also, in our touches began function, let's see, this is here. We're setting entities 0 current action. Let's see, so we have our click tile. Then we need to cache our selected entity, because this one gets reset once you click on the tile. Then we say ViewModel click tile at the clicked tile. This might change the selected entity, but also might change the selected tile. Most likely we click somewhere that doesn't have an entity because that's where we want the entity to move. And then if we have indeed a selected entity, so this one is not nil, then we do all this Dijkstra stuff. But instead of using entity 0, we use the selected entities position, and we set the selected entity's current action to a selected entity. So let's see what happens if we now build and run. So if I click, nothing happens. However, if I click an entity first and then click somewhere, this entity moves. Can do this. Same for this one. And for this one, the one thing that does, I can't see yet why it doesn't show the other path. So let's try and fix that first. Let's see where we redraw. Where we coloring, we're only looking at entity 0. So what I'll do it a bit different. What I'll do is, before drawing all the map tiles, I'll first extract all the paths, and I'll do so by making a compact map of all the entity's current actions that are move actions and that have a path. So this should, let's see, where am I going wrong? Oh, this one doesn't need to be there. This will return for me an array of paths, so an array of coordinates. And now, instead of looking at entities 0 for the coloring, what I can do is, if our position if path dot contains, so if I have a path where the path contains this position, then I will color blue. So let's build a run. Let's select a unit. So we now see the path, but also if I choose another one, I see the path. And this one as well. I can also again choose one of the other ones. And that's looking nice. I want to do one final thing. I want to highlight the tile that I'm actually clicking on. So before doing this check, I'll first do a check that our position is our ViewModel.select the tile. And if it does, then I'll say color becomes sk color.purple, else if, and then I do the next check. Oh. And then I do this check. Let's see if it fits. Yeah, it should fit there. Let's build a run. Yeah, now I also highlight the tile that's selected, but I can still also see the path. Now, one thing you might notice that is the one that moved. When the movement is completed, the unit stops moving. And that's because once the move animation is done, it doesn't have an animation to play anymore. To fix that, what we can do is we can make it so that once we're done with our complete action, when we complete the current action, we need a weak self then. Call redraw once more, because that will then set the idle animation. So let's take this one for example. If I move here, it moves, then calls redraw, and now it's animated again. And the same happens for this one as well. In the meantime, rotation and so on just keeps working. Once I upload the code for this episode, it will have more code also for integration with SwiftUI. Because of the length of the video, I'm going to save that one for the next episode. But and then we'll walk through, create and walk through the code. But don't be surprised if you look at GitHub and see it already there. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the ViewModel an observable object and make these variables published, meaning that when they change value, I can trigger the user interface to update. But we'll get into that in the next episode. So we can also show, for instance, the entity that's being selected or the tile that's being selected somewhere in the UI using a coordinate or a nice text window or something else. So thanks for watching for now and have a good day.